Hello and welcome. So in the last tutorial, we went through several different means of input. And so this time we're going to look at a couple examples of how to essentially take that input and map it to something else, right? So map it to the changing of the size of a shape or the position of something. And to do this, we're going to start with using the mouse position. It's an easy way. Everybody should be having some sort of trackpad, and it's nice because it's XY, and it allows us to do some pretty simple things. So let's go ahead and get started with that. Let's go ahead and create a mouse chop, right? A MouseIn chop. So if we go to chop, and if you just type in MOU, right, it's going to gray out everything but what we need, which is mouse in or mouse out. We're not going to be controlling the mouse position right now. We're just going to be doing mouse in. Okay, and so you can see, right, we're getting this. If you remember from the last tutorial, by default, normalize aspect is used. And there's something to note here that we didn't talk about in the last one. You'll see that there's these fields here that say position X, position Y, left button, right button, middle button, wheel, right? Now, you'll notice the only thing we can currently see right now is TX and TY. And the way that these fields work in every operator in TouchDesigner is that if it's a parameter like this, or it's something you can get out of the operator, then naming this is what allows it to be accessible. So if I wanted to be able to get the left button click, right, I can just type in the letter L here. It doesn't even have to be left. It can be anything you want. You could name it fart. It doesn't really matter. But so if I name that L, you'll notice immediately, now I have these three options here, right? And so if I click with my left mouse button, now I'm getting an on-off switch, right? I'm getting this third channel of information with the on-off switch. So you can see I can also do right button, middle button. I could actually do wheel. I can adjust the wheel increment, right? There's a lot of things that can happen with that. Now, there are other places where we'll look at this where actually what you put in the field is what you're doing is you're basically referencing an operator, one operator in another operator, and you actually put the name of that operator, which is right down here, MouseIn 1. You put the name of that operator in the field, but we'll cover that when we get to those things. And if you're following other tutorials that you find online, that you'll see people do the same thing, and hopefully that will make more sense. Okay, so let's say that we want to control the position of an object on screen with our mouse. So what we're going to do is we need to create the object that we want to control. So if we double click and we go to top, there's a circle top. So if I type in CI, you can see that circle is over here. I'm going to select this. I'm going to drop this here. Now remember, we can't directly connect a chop to a top. We can actually turn a chop into a top, but we're not going to be doing that right now. That's not our goal. So what we're going to do is we are going to want to change the center of this object. So if you look at this circle, you'll see that it has a radius, which is 0.4, and note, right, if we make this 1, right, it's going to be really huge, right? 0.5 should get us to fill the screen, right? And if I did 0.5 here, I just want to give you some sense of, what this all looks like, right? So, right, 0.5 to 0.5, right? Radius is half the diameter. So in TouchDesigner, and this is how it works when you're doing anything that's essentially using like a texture that runs through the graphics processing unit on your computer, the GPU, is that instead of it having pixel values, right? So instead of it being 0 to 720 or 1280 or whatever, it's always 0 to 1. And so it just divides this image, which is really nice for a lot of things. But it's just the standard is that, 0 is in the center, and then, negative 0.5, positive 0.5, positive 0.5 and negative 0.5, right? That's the way that these things work. That's the scale that they work at. So let's go ahead and make our radius, knowing that, let's make our radius a lot smaller. Let's make it 0.1, and we'll do 0.1 for this as well. That'll give us a circle that's still visible, but it's not going to take up the entire screen. So now the question is, right, how do we get these values in here to manipulate the position of this, right? Well, if you look down through our different options here, and I'm just going to shrink some of these things up. Note if you hit the plus sign that highlights up here, it just opens up a little bit more information, things that we don't really need to know right now. But you'll see that we have this center, and I want you to note that that center currently is in a fraction. We could do it in pixels if we want to. And then there's also the fraction aspect, right? And so we're going to leave it in fraction for now. And what we need to do is we really want to have, right, say our tx, right, since x is left and right, we'd like that to control the x position here. If you're not familiar with this, in everything starts, it goes x and y. And if it's a three-dimensional thing, so it has an x, y, and z coordinate, then it would be x, y, z, right? There'd be a third field there. But for 2D stuff, it always starts with x, and then it's y. Or, I mean, it could be u and v. We're not going to talk about that right now. But the x and y are these two positions. And so we want x to be mapped here. We want y to be mapped here. So in order to do that, it's pretty simple. What we're going to do is we are going to click this Viewer Active button. And then you'll notice that we can highlight each one of these fields and we get this little like caret symbol. And what that allows us to do is it allows us to drag and drop this value wherever we want it to go. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this TX. I'm going to click and I'm going to drag. And note that I do have my circle operator selected, right? It's highlighted in green, and that means that this is the circle operator I'm putting this into. And I'm just going to hover over here, and I'm going to say Export Chop. And so now, if I move my mouse left and right, you can see that the circle moves left and right with me. Now, it's not a perfect, right, alignment. You can see that it's actually going past the sides of the screen. And this is just something that, for this initial demo of how to control things, we're going to look at. There's a more complicated answer for how to make it map perfectly to the mouse every time, but we're not going to cover that in this early tutorial. There are other great tutorials out there that will help you map that, and I may cover that later as we get more involved in this. So then the next thing is we want to be able to do the Y. So let's go ahead and click the Y, and we're going to drag it over the same way, put it here, and say Export Chop. And so now, right, the mouse, or the circle, is moving with the mouse, right? So, right, we have two operators. We've done basically two steps, which is, right, to make this the right radius, and then have these two things fill in, and we've already got motion on our screen, which is pretty magical, right? It's a very easy process to do. So so now we have this other possibility. Let's say we want our left click to do something to our circle, right? And so the question is, what do we want this to do? And there's lots of possibilities for what that click can do. So let's see how we can map something that's on or off out to a different value. So what we're going to do is we need to manipulate this in some way, because let's say that we want to, where is the scale on this thing? Let's say we want to make the radius bigger when we have the button pressed, right? And then we want the radius to be smaller when the button is released. So we can go ahead, and what we need to do is we need to unclick that Viewer Active button, and we're actually going to be creating another operator here that allows us to change the range of values that we're seeing. So if I hover over the output port on this and I right click, it's going to immediately bring up the chop menu. And from the chop menu, what I want to do is I want to come down here and I want to grab the math object, right? And I can go ahead and type in MA or something like that, but I know it's right up here near the top because I use it all the time. So I'm going to go ahead and set this here, and you'll see it actually puts all three channels in here, right? We're not necessarily going to be using these top two, but we will be using this bottom one. So this operator, what it does is it allows you to do some simple mathematical operations on this. Generally, it is used for adjusting the scale of an object. So we're not going to worry about multiply or add right now. We could potentially do multiplication. However, what's going to happen is we want this to be 0.1 in its default state, right? We don't want it to be 0 because it'll disappear. And then let's say we want it to be 0.5 when we click on it. So we are going to need to be able to map that. And really, we've already got this range. If we click on range here, you'll see right now the from range is 0 to 1, right? So if I click, right, we're getting 0 to 1, that's from. And what I want to do is make it 2. And so I want to actually just set this to 0.1 and set this to 0.5. And when I do that, now when I click, it goes 0.5 back to 0.1. Right? It's pretty simple. So let's go ahead and map this to our circle. So we're going to select our circle operator, right? And we've got our radius here. So we're going to go ahead and click the viewer active button. And we're going to go ahead and drag this into our radius and say export chop. Now that's only going to work in one, right? In one dimension. So we just need to do the same thing one more time. We just need to click this, drag it over here and drop it here and say export chop. And so now, right, we can move this around, and when we click on it, it gets bigger and smaller, which is pretty awesome. So let's go ahead, and I want to show you how to do this with an image or a video as well, because it's a little bit different. There's one more operator. It's nice to be able to just make a circle do this thing. But we can do some other changes too. Now with this, right, there's also, if I turn on polygon mode, just as a heads up with a circle, right, circle is a circle, but you can also make it a hexagon or a septagon or whatever you want that to be. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off for the time being. And you can also like adjust softness. So you can notice here, right, I've got a much softer like hazy result there. That can be really useful in certain cases. This is just some additional settings. It's always good to go play with settings and try and figure out what they do and how you can use those in your patches or your networks. So the next step is going to be to create a top, and with this top, the one I want to do is I want to do a movie file in, right? And so if I can't find it because I'm blind, I can search for it, but it is the second from the bottom up here in the second column. So I'm going to go ahead and say movie file in, and we're just going to use the banana. It's going to work great for our purposes. But I want you to note that if we go through here, there isn't a way to transform, right? And transform, the word transform, if you're not familiar with it, in this context means to scale, to rotate, to distort in some way, shape, or form. That's what transforming an image is, or transforming a video file is. And it's a very common term across all software that deals with this. So, so what we need to do is there's no transform controls in our movie file in, so we need to create an operator that does that. So if we right click on the output port here, and you can either just type in trans, and there's transform. Click on this. And so now I have basically taken my movie file, I'm sending it in here, and in this operator, then I can do things like translate, rotate, right? If I click on the slider here, you can see I can rotate my banana around. I'm going to undo that. Translate is where I go to move the position on the screen, and note that it is also set to fraction right now. So let's go ahead and see if we can get this transform working with our operator. So I'm going to click on this viewer active. I'm going to, and I'm just going to click and drag this into, oops. I'm going to click and drag this into here and say export chop. I'm going to, and you can see already my banana is moving. I'm going to click this, drag this one over here, and export chop. All right, so now I've got my banana and my circle both moving in relation to my mouse position. And if I want to scale this banana, I can come down here to the math operator, right? Because this would either turn it off or on, basically. It'd be either visible or invisible. This one, right, though, is going to make it either small or large. And our scale is currently 1. So this might actually be problematic, right? We might well, let's just do it. We're going to have a really tiny banana. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that there and say export chop. Something else to note, once you export a chop, if I go ahead and hit this plus sign, you'll see that I get this, it says math1:L, right? And so if you look down here, the name of this operator is math, and what we're grabbing is L, right? And so if I come to this other field, you'll see that it says SY. If I select this green, it says export not found, right? So that just means that I need to go ahead and I can click and drag, and I can drop this right in here and say export chop, right? And I'm going to get the same thing. So now if I zoom in, you can see I have a very, let me go ahead and drag this up. I have a very tiny banana, and when I click, the banana gets larger, right? So we have successfully made a change, right, to our project. Now, with rotate, I want you to note that right, this is in a much different value range, right? It's negative 360 to 360, right? Let's say that we want to have this thing rotate back and forth, right? And we don't want it to rotate back and forth with our input. We want this to rotate back and forth on its own. Right? And so to get something to work on its own, there's several different operators that are meant for automation, right? They're meant to do cyclic things. There's some that will follow the BPM, the tempo, so it can fire off in time with music or at a consistent rate. There's another thing called an LFO, which is a low frequency oscillator, and that basically means it's going to be sliding through values over time, and we can control how that slide happens. So let's go ahead and create an LFO, and then we'll tie it in a math operator, and we'll or we don't even need the math operator for it, but we'll go ahead and put it into our rotate, so we can see that thing happening as well. And all of these are steps to kind of show you the process and get you used to doing something that you're going to be doing a lot of as you build these networks. So I'm going to double click, and right for the LFO is a chop, right? It's just outputting a single value from either negative 0.5 to positive 0.5, or there's some other options in there. And we'll look at those. So if I go to my chop and I come down here to LFO, which is right in here, and I drop this in here, you'll see that automatically there's this, right? I'm getting data that's just sliding back and forth, and it may even be going from 1 to -1 right now. If you look down into the parameters, there's a type, there's whether to turn it on or off, right? Frequency, offset, amplitude, and phase, right? So frequency is like how fast is it going back and forth between 1 and -1. So if I crank this up, it's going to go a lot faster. If I crank this down, it's going to go a lot slower. Let's set our frequency to 0.2. Now, the offset basically says where's the midpoint of this, right? By default, it's set to 0. If I was to crank this up to 1, not 21, I don't know how that happened, but 1, right? You'll see that now it is going basically down to 0 and up to 1, right? With up to 2, excuse me, with 1 being the midpoint in there, right? So I'm going to go ahead and leave that at 0 because that's what we want. And then amplitude is currently 1. That's why we're going from -1 to 1. And so what we can do is if we set this, we know that this is from 360 to -360. So we can just say 360 here, right? And that's going to allow us to go from -360 to +360. And that's really all we need to do. What phase does is it basically says, where does this start? Does it start at 0, or does it start at 360, or does it start somewhere in between there? If you aren't familiar with sine and cosine and all of that, not the end of the world. That's, something we'll learn. But the big thing is to know is like, oh, I don't want it to start at 0. I want it to start somewhere else on this curve that it's making. There are different types. There's sine, there's Gaussian. Gaussian is just above 0. It's like a sine wave that stops at 0. Triangle is a linear ramp, right? So instead of a sine wave, which is more of a curve, right? A triangle is literally a triangle. It goes up and it comes down, and goes up and comes down, and goes up and comes down. Ramp is like a triangle, except that it drops off at the end and starts over, right? So it's sort of like a sawtooth. And square is either on or off, right? So it's either 360 or negative 360, right? Which wouldn't do anything for us because that's going to look the same on the screen. And then pulse, it just sends out a little quick pulse once per the frequency cycle, right? Which we're not interested in. We're going to use sine. Okay, so if I go to my transform and I come down here and we say, okay, here's the rotate parameter. Let's go ahead and lock the viewer active, drag this in here, and say export chop. And then if I come over here and let's go ahead and make this our background by clicking on the display button, right? You can see the banana is now spinning and it goes forward and backward, and it kind of slows down as it gets to the end, and that's because it's a sine wave. If it was a triangle, it would be more linear. And so if I click it right now, it's huge, and now it's small. If we were to go to our LFO and uncheck this viewer active, so we can select the operator and change this to triangle, you'll kind of see some of the difference, right? It's like a much crisper bounce when it hits the end of that line, right? And if I think in this case ramp, well, let's see what ramp does, right? So ramp is going up, going up, going up, and you'll notice it looks like it's a continuous rotation, right? It's actually just rotating in one direction the whole time. And that's because it's never going below 0. And 360, if you're used to working with degrees and circles, right? 360 degrees is exactly the same as 0 degrees. And so it's just cycling over and over and over again, which is pretty cool. If we wanted this to go the other direction, we can make our amplitude negative 360, right? And so now this banana should be spinning the opposite direction, right? Okay, so there are, right, so here this tutorial kind of shows some ways that we can start to manipulate our object, both by moving it around on the screen with our mouse, and you'll note it doesn't map perfectly. And as I said, that's something where we'd have to do a little bit more of a deep dive into TouchDesigner, and we're not at that point yet in order for that to work. But yeah, you can move this around, and you can click on this, make it bigger, and it's rotating on its own. Cool. That's the end of this tutorial.